There are three games that I have that I pretty much shelved or tried to get rid of in one form or another. And over time, they came back. They got resurrected in my collection. And I want to do three brief videos to introduce those games to you and why they're back and why I love them so much. The first game is a well-known game. It's an oldie like all of them, but it's a goodie. Sentinels of the Multiverse. I was very excited about this game. Everything that I'd read in videos, everything that I'd read about terms of reviews and gameplay, I understood, or at least I thought I understood, as much as a person can without owning the game, the pros and the cons. Some of the cons seemed to be sort of the IP. It was almost as though people were saying, well, this is a really great mechanism. The way this game is played is awesome, except it should be, represented by DC or by Marvel. For better or for worse, it's not. But I'll say this. I got over that once I started to get into the game because I realized that these guys who, the game's creators, right here, had worked really hard at creating some backstory, not 60 years of backstory like you're going to find for Superman and Batman and Spider-Man and so forth, but they worked well on creating some story for these guys, whether it was a villain or a hero, as well as, how the nemesis part of this game plays into it, like these guys are nemeses for each other, that sort of thing. And so there is something there. It's obviously not as rich and developed as some of the other IPs, but they've done a really good job. And so as I began to play the game, I began to appreciate that more and more and more. And I know another criticism was always the art, and that's probably folded into that DC Marvel idea. But yet at the same time, once I started to get into it, I never objected to it wholeheartedly. But once you start working through some of the character decks and so forth, the art really grows on you. And I never despised it in the first place. And now I quite enjoy it. The universe that they've created here is really interesting. It's well balanced. It's very highly thematic. All the different decks, whether it's an environment, a villain, or a hero, are well themed. And besides, some of those DC Marvel crossovers are obvious. I mean, you've got Hulk-like characters and Flash-like characters and Superman-like characters and Batman-like characters and Iron Man-like characters. So you've got a good mix of everything. It's not a complete rip-off, but what are you going to do for superpowers anyway? Someone's got to be able to fly. So that's what they've done with Sentinels. Now for my part, I thought that all that good stuff would outweigh what I was reading about the bookkeeping. That the bookkeeping was onerous, it was frustrating, and I'm a solo player. So I'm playing this game by myself, and you have to have a minimum of 3 hands in play. So 1 environment, 1 villain, and 3 heroes. After 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 plays, I thought I'd given it a fair shot, and the frustration grew to the point where, yes, that tipped the balance on everything, and I shelved it. I loved so much about this game, but the bookkeeping was and is horrendous for a solo player. Now I can imagine that for 2 or 3 people playing this game, maybe even 4, that aspect, which I see as bookkeeping, would come from a different perspective if there were more players, because it could actually be a fun part of the game. Where you're pointing out to each other, don't forget, I'm immune to cold, and, someone else saying, don't forget, every time the villain attacks, I get a free attack every turn. So, I can see how having a group cooperative game of this would be really fun, and how that bookkeeping aspect that I find so deplorable actually could become an exciting part of the tension in the game. Alas, for a solo player, not so much. And so I shelved this for years. I tried to trade it, I tried to sell it, really no takers, and I had invested heavily in this game. When I traded away for the base game, I also went out and bought Shattered Timelines and a bunch of hero packs, and now I have even more. So I had already invested heavily in something. I took a chance on it, and I thought, well, that chance didn't pay off. After a couple years on the shelf, just sitting there, I thought, I don't know, I could donate it or something. I decided to try to resurrect it. And I had one idea, actually 2 ideas. The first idea was to go through all my sets, whether it was environment, a hero, or a villain, and cull all the complex decks from there. And so I was just looking over here at some that I did that with, like Citizen Dawn, for example. She has all these minions that make the bookkeeping very complex. And there's others, Grand Warlord Voss, and some of them are heroes, and some are even environments that really, really ramp up the complexity of the game. So I still have a little bit more work to do there, but I have literally and physically removed those decks from my Sentinels of the Multiverse universe. So they're just not a part of my gameplay anymore, at least not until such time as maybe I do play cooperatively with some other people. And so that really, really helped. They're just gone. Now some of you, that's not like, if you're a purist, of course, you don't want to have to do that to your game, but I did. The second thing that was, no pun here, but the second thing that was a real game changer for me was finding a two-handed variant on Board Game Geek. The two-handed variant that I found is so strong that it's almost like the variant for Thunderstone Advanced that Tom Vassell proposed, called Epic Thunderstone. That variant is so well embraced by the board game community that the folks at AEG actually folded that into one of the rule sets as an option, and so it became official. That's how strong that Epic variant is for Thunderstone Advance. For this game, a gentleman named Jack Darwood came up with a two-handed variant, which makes solo playability so much more palatable. You have a third, it was originally called a sidekick variant. I'm not going to go into it at length. I know the name of that changed. Suffice it to say that it just decreases the bookkeeping, I feel, exponentially, especially combined with what I did in culling my decks. So now I can play this game. It has all the pick up and go that I want, all the transportability that I want, whether I'm playing at lunch at work or I'm at the cottage. I can easily grab 3 or 4 decks, have lots of variability, lots of replayability, get to know my characters really, really well. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How are they being attacked? How to take down the bad guy? All kinds of things, all kinds of strategy, and I can really enjoy those decks now without having to get caught up in the frustration and the mind games of constant, the bookkeeping of, well, who was first and who was second? And if this does this, then what does this do? And if that does that, then what does this do? Too much puzzle for me. Too much puzzle, and maybe for most people. So I'm simply here to say this. If you're a solo game player, I highly recommend you check out Jack Darwood's two-handed variant, and I highly recommend you go through whatever parts of this game you have, cull out all the hard pieces, and give it another go around, especially if you've shelved this game in frustration like I did. Sentinels of the Multiverse has risen so high in my personal ranking that I, put that little heart on Board Game Geek. I'm one of the fans now. I love this game. In fact, just looking at the box makes me want to play. I've got 2 more games that I want to share with you in this little series of mine. This is the first. Go out and enjoy yourself some Sentinels of the Multiverse.